This next stitch that I'm going to show you is the raised stem stitch. You can see it right here in the petals and in this flower too. For this I used a size 5 pearl cotton, an eleganza pearl cotton, and for this I used a rayon blend thread. You can see it has a shinier appearance. So this is the raised stem stitch, and I am going to do the stitch on this petal right here. Right now I'm using an eleganza size 8 pearl cotton. It's not going to be quite as thick as the example that I showed you on my all stitched up version, but you can see how a thinner thread will look. So I'm going to start by making several foundation stitches. So I have one right near the bottom of where my petal meets the center. And these are just straight stitches. And there's no set number of stitches that you need to add. It's just determined. I'm just eyeballing it, and it will vary on whatever I'm stitching. So if I have a smaller petal, I might make a few less. If I have something larger, I would add a few more. I'm going to do 5 little stitches. Okay, so I've worked my last foundation stitch. Now I'm going to tilt this just because it's a little easier to show you when I stitch it from left to right. So I'm bringing up my needle below my first foundation stitch. I'm bringing up my needle and thread. And now I'm going to take my needle under this second stitch that I have there, the second foundation stitch, and pull it through. I'm going under the next one, pulling through, and the next one, just like that. And the final one. So when I get to my last stitch, I need to secure this little row. So I'm going to take my needle down right at the edge of the petal. And now I'm going all the way down to the bottom again. And I'm bringing my needle up. And the same exact way, I'm taking it under the second little foundation stitch. And then working my way all up to the top of the petal. It's a fairly quick stitch once you start this. And then I bring my needle down at the tip of the petal again. You see you can shift these. These don't really need to be shifted, but you can kind of move them around, place them where you want them to be. So I'm going to start this next one. Oops. Take it under the second foundation all the way up to the top. Okay, so I've reached the tip of this petal. And so my next stitch isn't going to go all the way up there. I'm gradually going to taper where my last stitch ends. So I'm taking it under the second, doing the same exact thing with each new row. You can see after I pull it through a stitch, I kind of bring my thread back and hold it in place. Actually I still have a tiny bit left, so I'm going to go under that last stitch one more time. And then take it down again. You can make these rows as tight or as loose as you want. It's neat to see the different effects that you can get by pushing them tighter together or making it like a looser woven section. And also experiment with the types of thread that you use. Okay, so now this is going to be my last row. I'm ignoring that top row, and I'm just taking my needle down along the edge a little lower than those last few stitches that I did, if that makes sense. And now I'm going to work this again exactly the same. It's getting towards the end, and I won't have to replace my thread, so that's always a good thing. And doing the same thing, taking my needle down there. And I think I can fit one last row in here. And so now each petal that you stitch along here, you're going to do the same thing. You can either use the same color, you can vary the color. It's really neat to do it with a variegated thread because then it looks like you really put a lot of work into each of the petals with the changing of colors, but really it's very simple and you get that nice changing colors effect with the variegated thread. I'll show you, I did that right here. So each of the petals, this was just one spool of thread, but because it's variegated, you get a lot of color in there. So that is the raised stem stitch.